Welcome back to Coffee and Cream, a podcast where we are changing the narrative one cup of coffee at a time. My name is Jake, and I'm here with Matt Bryant.
What is going on, my brother?
Doing all right?
Yeah, I'm feeling good,
Got
man.
a little head shake going on. Is that good?
It's a good sign. I was kind of sleepy earlier, but now I'm waking up. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, you could say that it's the coffee.
I can say it's the coffee.
It was legitimately the coffee.
Legitimately the coffee, yeah.
But yeah,
that's a good segue.
That's a great segue to our sponsor for today, which is Switch Coffee. These guys are awesome. They are creating a culture of conversation in St. Louis. If you go on switchcoffee.co, you can use our promo code, which is Coffee and Cream, for a 10% discount on your order. That's pretty generous.
Yeah, it's really generous.
That's super awesome. So go on switchcoffee.co, Coffee and Cream, 10% discount. Also want to give a shout out to JM Films for all of your film and video needs. You can check out jmfilms.com. Also want to give a huge announcement today. This is something we've been holding back for a little while now.
Yeah.
But we're recording this in June, but this is dropping in July. This is the first episode. This is the first time you're going to be hearing this.
Okay, come on now, Jake.
Okay.
Want some drum roll?
Do it.
I'm like, you.
We are sponsored by Crossway Publishing.
What?
You heard me right. CROSS Way.
Oh.
Crossway. So guys, this is a huge deal. These guys are awesome. If you have a ESV study Bible, check. If you love gospel-centered resources, check. Go to crossway.org. These guys are awesome, and we have a really cool partnership with them now. So if you go to our website at coffeeandcreampodcast.com, we have a resources tab on there. And from there, we're going to be having posted resources that we find super helpful when it comes to the issue of racial reconciliation and just kind of working through the ideas that have come with racism and how it affects our society today. But underneath there, you're going to see a sponsored content tab. Those are resources that Crossway has uniquely provided for us so that we can read and recommend to you guys, the listeners, so that you can check this out and just see for yourself. Again, these guys are awesome. Crossway.org. These guys have been a lot of my books are Crossway books.
Yeah, I love my ESV study Bible, man.
Dude, it is my go-to Bible.
Yeah.
It is my go-to Bible. So guys, we're gonna be posting on social media all throughout the month of July with the books that we're reading from them, seeing the insights that we're gaining from these books, and we're commending them to you. So go check them out at crossway.org. You got something to say?
Yeah, man, I love Crossway. Like, just they're gospel-centered, they're Bible-centered. Yeah. And more importantly, they want to take that and equip people, learn how to engage the world with the gospel truth, man. Yeah. So I love them.
So we got a lot to talk about tonight.
Yeah, we do.
We got a lot to talk about. It's kind of it's a heavy topic. Yeah. I could just use that phrase and just apply it to any one of our episodes. That's a heavy topic.
Yeah. I like this topic though. It's one of my favorite ones.
It's a good one. Before we dive into it though, we're gonna go into our verse for today, which is Hebrews 10:24 through 25. My Bible is behind me, so I'm just gonna read it right here.
Do it. Hey, like I said last time, it's right here.
It's right here.
It's right there, bro.
It's right there.
In the heart.
I don't have to go anywhere else. It's right here.
That's right.
Trust my heart.
Yes. And also trust the ESV, which crossway.org. Check it out.
So, and let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So we're going to be diving into a topic that's gained some traction over the past few months, ever since the 2016 election. This idea of it's an exodus, in some regards, and so some people are calling it a quiet exodus, some people are calling it a black exodus, but there is seeming to be this trend where Black Christians are leaving majority white churches, specifically over the past year. This was a big deal a couple of years ago where Pew studies came out where young African Americans were leaving the church in regular numbers, trying to understand that. But this is something totally unique where it's regardless of gender or age. It's something that's affecting majority white churches. And we're going to be kind of diving into some of the articles that were written about this and kind of diving into our own thoughts about these. When should a black person leave a white church? Should they leave a white church? What are the biblical reasons for leaving a church? Is there an exodus of black people from white churches, from even any churches in general? So we're just going to dive straight into this. Matt, you got this article for us.
Yeah, man. So I think what really brought to my mind was this article that the New York Times published back on March 9th of this year, literally called "A Quiet Exodus: Why Black Worshipers Are Leaving White Evangelical Churches." Basically, this article is a story following a black woman named Mrs. Pruitt through her transition out of her predominantly white church and her search for a new church home. And then around that, beautifully done article-wise and written form, are other stories and facts and figures about how we're seeing this trend of black churchgoers leaving white evangelical churches, majority white churches. And some of the reasons they give in there are basically built around this political climate that's located in the church. Like with the increase, I won't say the increase of, but like the more prominent the news became about black men and women being shot by cops, the more political things got, the more traction the current president got during that time, the more black people started to feel like they weren't being heard in churches. And so they started to leave. And so the article here kind of pulls that out. And so but the question I guess I have is it really happening? You know? So Jake, when you hear about this quiet exodus, or this black exodus, as some may call it, I like the word quiet because it's on the down low. When you
don't let them know,
right?
Can't let them know we're leaving.
When you hear about that, what do you think about that as a white Christian, or Christian that just happens to be white?
Yeah, it's hard because it's something I haven't really ever experienced, and I think we'll kind of talk about this a little bit later of, is this actually really happening? But I think for now, I think from what we're seeing from what's coming out from the media and what's coming out from other people, we're seeing maybe not quite an exodus, but you're seeing an uncomfortableness in many churches. And I think what many black people are experiencing is this kind of maybe not an exodus so much as it is just an uncomfortableness. They're uncomfortable where they are. And as someone who's white, there's part of me that it's hard for me to understand because I've never even really experienced those reasons, right? I've always grown up in a state of comfortableness, right? Like I've grown up in majority white areas. I've been super blessed to where I have been raised and born, and we're given biblical values to take into the world. But my first interactions with the idea that race is a problem was in that comfortable zone. And I experienced the first thing I remember was the Trayvon Martin shooting in 2012, right? That was the first thing that I remember ever really happening. And my first introduction to, is race still an issue in America today? That was from the state of comfortableness. And I remember even watching the trial of George Zimmerman and seeing and just being glued to the screen of what's going to happen? Are they going to let him go? What's going to happen? And my introductions to these race topics were through those lenses, were through those perspectives. And it's hard for me because I'm still wrestling and grappling with that issue. But the other hand of it is that because I have moved to St. Louis, I have become more empathetic to the issue. And it's something that, while it's hard for me to understand, the part of it also is it breaks my heart. Right? I've experienced depression and isolation when it comes to churches and when it comes to looking for churches. I've experienced that, and it breaks my heart to know that there are people who are experiencing that. and who don't feel comfortable where they are. And I can feel that.
Yeah.
And God has, I think, really been working, and he has really been softening my heart to this issue, especially when it comes to be able to empathize more with my Black brothers and sisters, with you, on these issues, and to weep with those who weep, to mourn with those who mourn. And so, as a white person coming into this topic itself, like I'm working through my own lack of understanding and my own lack of, I haven't experienced this. And the other part of me that is trying to emotionally, mentally, and like spiritually empathize with people.
Yeah.
And who have lived completely different experiences than I have.
Yeah.
I have never had a bad interaction with a police officer, but you probably have. And many of our listeners who are Black probably have. And that's just something that's not on my radar.
Yeah.
And so there is this tension in me of like, it's hard for me to understand, but also I want to empathize with this issue, especially when it comes to the church, because we love the church. We make it loud and proud that we go to a specific church in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And we love the specific church, and we believe that it's through the church that racial reconciliation will begin and take place and go throughout our culture.
Yeah.
And so that's why this hits hardest for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So what about you? What are your thoughts going into this? Is this? I read this with a different lens. What's the lens that you're reading this from?
Yeah, man, I'm reading from an interesting lens, because I've come from a different perspective of even majority Black culture sometimes.
Yeah.
I grew up in a multi-ethnic, multicultural life.
Yeah.
I went to a Black church, but a lot of my friends during the week were white.
Yeah.
Because I was homeschooled during that time. And so like it's just always this interesting blending. But one of the things I always noticed as a kid is like churches were completely different, like completely separate. And so, and when I look at this discussion here, I ask myself the question: is it really happening?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I grew up in a world where they were already separated, and so when I started to see, and let's be real honest with you, like recently in the past like 20 years, there's been an increase, I would think, of Black people start going to white churches. They start going to white churches for different reasons.
Yeah.
Some go because it's the closest one to them.
Yeah.
Others, which I would believe, go because of the Bible teaching and it's biblical and it's sound. Others go because they have relationships with people there. There are multiple reasons why a Black person would go to a white church.
Yeah.
And so when I hear stories about the exodus, the quiet exodus from white churches, I ask myself, okay, is this happening, or is it something like the media is blowing up?
Sure.
And I think it's really hard to say.
Yeah. Because
we have to be careful, especially in the Christian culture, of trying to use words like exodus. Because when we hear the word exodus, we think of what? Like Moses taking out over 2 million people from Egypt.
Yeah.
And so we think of exodus, think of like this large amount of people leaving at one time. And I don't know if that's the narrative or not, because it's kind of hard to track that unless you're a white church that's counting how many Black people are in your pew, quite literally.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, like most people don't pay that much attention to that statistic. So again, like I said, it's hard to say if this is actually like a big exodus.
Yeah.
But what I will say though, is that I don't doubt that it is happening.
Okay.
I don't doubt that it's there are people that have stories, and I think we've heard enough of them to know that there are situations where Black people are considering or have left the white church because of what's going on there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's always been a thing, honestly.
Yeah.
I think there have always been African Americans that have gone to predominantly white churches and have decided to leave after a certain time frame.
Yeah.
I think it's increased right now under our current racial climate as well. And by increase, I mean like made known more often. And so I think but I'm glad it's made known.
Yeah.
Because it presents to us a unique situation that the church has to think through.
Yeah.
Because we've talked before on the podcast about not being a church that just tries to get all Black people or all minorities in your church just to do that.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, you've gotten some in there, and now they're leaving. The question you have to ask is why? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
You know, and like if they're leaving because like they're moving away, stuff like that, that's fine. But if they say that they're leaving because of racial things, that's the time we have to start talking and thinking through that.
Yeah. Because there was a Pew Research that was out a couple of years ago that talked about how African Americans, they are the most religious group in America.
Yeah.
But only 14% of them identify as evangelical Protestants.
Yeah.
Like, that's a low number.
Yeah.
And you know, you compare that to the white average for evangelical Protestant, it's just white and black difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like night and day difference on those issues. And it's hard because like African Americans are highly religious, but yet they're leaving white churches in droves. And so I think that's a good question to ask is, you know, is there something going on in white churches? And even like, is this an issue in other majority churches, right? Yeah. Is this an issue for the majority black church where you have a quiet exodus of white people? Is that happening? Like, is there an exodus of Koreans from I don't know, other multi-ethnic church? Like, are those things that are happening, but because of our specific time and specific culture right now, this is the issue that's being highlighted. So I want to know your thoughts on that, because I'm still wrestling through with that as well. Like, is there a need for all the cultures to reevaluate kind of where they are on trying to bring in other ethnicities into their congregations?
Yeah, I mean, this is a real good question, man. Yeah, I think I want to step back a little bit and talk about that Pew Research. Yeah. Right. And so, like, can we link that to the show notes?
Yeah.
We'll do that.
Done.
Boom. Because I think there's this thing that we're separating. You said evangelical Protestant.
Yeah.
And in there's also this historical black church, right? And then there's other ones like Catholic and things like that. And so, and I think also you have to understand, like, that people are self-identifying.
Okay.
All right. And so, like, that's the thing right there.
Yeah.
And so overall, I think the question of the issue of black people leaving the white church is what defines a white church. You know what I'm saying? Like, is it majority or is it evangelical? Because black churches can be evangelical as well. Okay. You know what I'm saying? So when I saw that Pew Research, I see what you're saying there, but that's kind of taking into account that historical black churches aren't really evangelical, and we're only equating that with white churches, right? So the question now, you see where I'm coming from in that? Yeah. And so what we have to be careful in that research is automatically equating, like, oh, there's no black people in evangelical churches. No, they are. Yeah. But they aren't in majority white churches. They're in evangelical black churches, which fall in the category of historical black. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And so we have to be careful in that realm. Now, your question was, do I think that black churches are called minority majority churches? Minority majority. Yeah.
See that 5 times fast.
Yeah, really. Should they be like? Are you asking, like, should they desire to have multi-ethnic people in their church?
Yeah, I mean, is this a concern? Like, because I know there's pushback against this as well from people, and saying, like, oh, you're calling us out in white churches, why aren't you calling out in black churches? Right? Yeah. They're just as not as diverse. As majority white churches. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, well. First of all, yes. Yeah. Like, majority churches should pursue and welcome in people of different ethnic backgrounds, wholeheartedly. That's the call of every Christian. Sure. If someone walks into your service that doesn't look like you, you're not supposed to treat them like the stranger, or as James puts it, as the poor person. Yeah. Put them in the back. You know what I mean? And only put the people that you really care about up front. Sure. I think that's a call for every church. Yeah. And so the question I would have on that, though, is what would prompt a white Christian or a white person to try to visit and join a black church, right? Because I think we see more minorities going into white churches because we have, let's be honest, more white churches that are more prominent. Yeah. Majority-led churches are usually in areas that, gonna be real, most white Christians probably won't go to. Now, I'm not saying like that's. I'm not saying like every Christian like that. I think we've seen an increase, like we know in a church plant right now, in a minority, pretty poor area that has a good chunk of white Christians there.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not saying that every church is like that.
Yeah.
But I do believe that there is this stigma attached to the black church of I won't fit in because I'm white and I'm come from the oppressive culture, so therefore I'm not going to even try. And I think I want to hear your thoughts on this a little bit later.
Yeah.
Or actually right after this. But I think that we have this idea that, well, I wait for the other person to make the move first, right? I'll be real with you. I think a lot more black people are willing to go to white churches than white people are willing to go to black churches because the majority culture is more predominant, right?
So I mean that's based on just statistics, right?
Exactly. Based on
statistics. It just statistically makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you are in India, right?
Yeah.
And you're a white person, you're probably going to go to a majority Indian church. Like that's just how that goes. You're not going to find minority majority churches. You're not going to find many of those in India.
Yeah.
You're going to find a lot more of those being either multicultural or you're going to find them being just monocultural.
Yeah.
So
like in the area we're right now, I can probably count, maybe like 5-6 different white churches in around us, and then maybe like 1 or 2. Yeah. So statistically, like I would probably end up going to a predominantly white church.
Okay.
Right. So like I'm not saying like they're making that choice because like they're white, want to be white people, though that could be a factor.
Sure.
All right. But statistically, there's more of a chance there. That does not negate nor take away the fact that minority majority-led churches are to welcome in and pursue people of different ethnicities. Yeah. My question would be for you, as a man that's white and a Christian, or as I like to put it, a Christian with lighter skin tone. Like, what would prompt you to say, I want to join this minority church?
I want to be hip, man.
You want to be?
I want to be hip. I want to be in with the kids. It's just the thing to do, right?
We'll talk about that in a minute. But like, yeah, just finish your thought. I'm sorry.
No, I was kidding.
Yeah, he's kidding. Yeah.
I was kidding.
Some people aren't though when they think like that though.
I mean, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. There's a subtle racism there as well.
Yeah.
There's been a whole horror movie about that. It's called Get Out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what? It's one of those things where I would like to think that if I was visiting a black church, I would want to go there because it is the place that preaches the gospel.
Yeah.
It is the place that it has biblical community. It teaches God's word. It has sound doctrine. It has sound biblical love and authentic community there. Like that's the reason I want to go there to be a part of that. And if there are no monocultural churches there that do that, then I'm going to the church that preaches the gospel. Yeah. It is, and if it's a majority black church, it's a majority black church. Yeah. I would like to think that by doing that, there wouldn't be any biases there, or there wouldn't be any prejudices there, or anything like. Part of me would be like, well, what do people think if I show up there?
Just be real with it. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's an uncomfortableness there. Like if I went to someone like Eric Mason's church,
yeah,
I would love to go to that church and hear him preach, but there would be an uncomfortableness there because it's a different kind of culture there with the black church. It's a different culture there with the multi-ethnic church.
Yeah.
And part of that's good.
Yeah.
Right? Like part of that's good. Like I get fired up listening to Eric Mason's sermons.
Yeah.
In a different way than I do listening to John Piper sermons. They bring different things to the table. They have their own different flavors of how they do things because their cultures are different and they speak to their context so well. And so, back to your question, like if I were to visit a majority black church, or want to attend one, it would be because that's the place that preaches the gospel. That's the place that speaks God's word soundly, routinely. It's a part of the culture there. They have authentic biblical community there.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers your question at all.
No, I mean that's real. And I think jump back to that point where like you want to be hip. I think there are people out there that will say, "Well, I'm going to a minority church, like right down the street from me," and they might not necessarily be doing that. First of all, I applaud you for saying that you want to go to the church that's minority because they preach the gospel.
Yeah.
All right. I think that is what people need to do. They have to think through, okay, what church preaches the gospel?
Yeah.
Which one is living out the gospel?
Yeah.
What are the leaders like there? And then make that choice based off of that.
Sure.
So if that is your guide, that's biblical and that's true. On the flip side of that, I think there are people that say, I want to go to the minority church because they are the minority church and may not actually have, that church may not be preaching the gospel.
Have there been people who say that?
I believe there are. Like I'm honestly, like, for real. And people may not say that, but they think that in their heads. They boast in the fact that they are going to the minority church. Like, I am the guy. I'm that one person in the middle of this black church that's different. And I love it. I love being that different person. I love being able to say I go to the black church. And I'm not saying that to discourage people from being the minority in a black church. I'm not saying that at all.
Yeah.
But I think motives have to be checked, right? There are black people that go to a majority church because they've experienced bad things in a black church. I've heard stories of these, of how they got tired of going to a black church that was all about money, and so they found this minority church. Yeah, this majority church, excuse me, that preached the gospel and everything, and so they respond to that. Like, there are black people that left the black church because of some repetitive sin. Yeah, but in the same time, they've cast this vision like all black churches are this way. You know what I mean? Yeah. So they go to this white church, but then what happens is these political climates come up. Yeah, and then people don't feel welcome in their own church, and they decide, okay, well, I can't go back to the church I was at, so I got to find a whole new church, and I feel isolated. Yeah, you know, and so I think that's a real thing. So, like, walking out what it means biblically to find and stay at a church is very, very important, because that will be a bigger motivation than how we feel about certain racial issues. Yeah. So let's kind of go back. So what are some of the reasons why a black person would leave a majority white church? Yeah, man, I think that's a good question. I think there are good biblical reasons. I think there are reasons that are kind of middle ground kind of information, middle ground kind of views. Yeah. Then there are bad reasons to leave the white church. Yeah. I think some good reasons. One are they aren't preaching the Bible. Yeah. They're preaching more politics than anything else. I think a good reason for a black person to leave a white church is if they are constantly abusive, in a sense. Like, there's no community there. They're constantly trying to isolate them, in a sense. So I think that those are good reasons to leave the church. You use the word abusive. Can you kind of parse that out a little bit more? Yeah. Because that's a pretty triggered word in our society today. Kind of parse that out a little bit. What do you mean by abusive? Yeah, I think what I mean by abusive is this culture or realm where they don't feel wanted and they actually feel pushed to a corner, right? Okay. So I heard a story one time of a African American man who went with some friends to a Bible study at a church, and it was him and majority white people there, and then another Mexican guy, and somehow they got on the topic of talking about gun control and gun laws. And one guy there, it was a staunch gun advocate. Like, he was all about that. Now, I'm gonna preface this and saying there's nothing wrong with liking guns. Sure. There's nothing wrong with having guns. Like, I have nothing against that. Yeah. But in the story, what happened was they were talking about it, and he got very adamant about how much he loved his guns. And in that, he kept looking at the black man and the Mexican guy. And he eventually made a gun motion at both of them, talking about how he really wants to keep his gun to protect his home from intruders, and then points at them and goes, bang, bang. Now, if that's the culture that you have in a church, that's abusive. And if that's constantly happening, that is what's going to drive a lot of African Americans out. Right? And so when I talk about abuse, I'm not talking like necessarily physical abuse, but I'm talking about creating a culture where you're constantly making them feel unwanted and that they are a threat to your culture. And it's even just, to kind of add on to what you're saying, it's also just they don't take time to understand the experiences that you're going through, right? Like, you know, for all these past police shootings that have happened. Yeah. Like, I've seen it on you, man. Like, it's worn on you. And I could either choose to love you through that. It's like, hey, let's wait for the facts, right? Let's wait for the facts.
those are two responses people can take. And more often than not, you see people saying, wait for the facts before we make a judgment on this. And, Black people are saying, look, we're hurting, right? Like we are these things that keep happening. We're hurting because of this. And I think part of why I think abuse is probably it's a strong word, but I think it can be a necessary word in those instances where they're not being cared for in a way that they need to be cared for.
Yeah.
And that can lead to it can lead to a kind of emotional abuse where they're just not feeling like they're being cared for or shepherded or loved on well by their community. It's like you said, it's politics over Christianity.
Yeah.
It's constant talk of how Black Lives Matter are a terrorist alt-left organization. It's continual talk about how the race narrative is made up.
Yeah.
It's all of these things and more that just puts a lot of strain on people who feel the opposite way. Because there are places that I go to that I get stressed out before I go to because like, oh, what if this comes up? What if that comes up? What if this comes up?
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine what it's like for a Black person going into a white church. Like, what are they going to say if this product? What am I going to say if this gets brought up? What am I going to say if they say this or this or this?
Yeah, most of the time you're like, okay, if they say this, I'm out. Like that. I mean, that's a real thing.
One strike, I'm out.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, man. Like now to that, it's got to be some grace, obviously.
Sure,
you got to show a little grace, but like there is a natural response if you're African American walking to a majority white church. It's like if they say something like this, I don't know how I'm supposed to respond because I'm supposed to be a Christian and love them in this process. At the same time, I don't feel like I'm being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned the idea of waiting, like waiting for facts. I think there are two different types of waiting. There's abusive waiting, and then there's telling someone to wait abusively, and then telling someone I'm going to wait with you. So there is abusive waiting.
It's a good distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it's really important. Like we were talking earlier about like child abuse, and one form of child abuse is having your child wait in the car on a hot day while you go inside the store.
Yeah.
Okay, you're telling that person, hey, just wait. That child just wait, but in their waiting, they are suffering. They are in a hot car. They feel like they're on fire. They feel like they're suffocating. They are isolated. That's a type of waiting. But then there's the waiting room waiting, where you're with your friend and your family. It's like, hey, we're waiting to hear the news fully come out from the doctor. I'm going to sit with you with my arm around you, and we're going to wait together.
Yeah.
Those are two different types of waiting.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, let's wait on the facts. But if you're saying let's wait you wait over there and I'm just going to continue with my life, that's completely different than saying, hey, I'm with you right now. Let's wait to hear the whole things and then let's move together from that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, but again, you go back to like the original question of like, I think that is another reason why a Black person might leave the church, and I think it might be okay if they're being abused. Mm-hmm. Now, the middle of the road reasons to leave the church, and I think this actually really applies to most people. Like, is there a church closer to where you live? Is there are you moving? Things like that. Like those are the reasons why African Americans might leave the white church. Like things happen, like life changes and you have to change with that, Yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Or in my case, like I got called from my dad's church to come to this church simply because the Lord wanted me to help me grow and grow my ministry and grow my life spiritually and be mature and meet you and meet the guys in the sound and all that. Like that was God's plan. Like God simply calls that. And so we don't want to make it out like all Black people that are leaving the white church are leaving because they're angry. Yeah. There are other reasons. But I think there are also bad reasons to leave the white church.
Okay.
And I think one of the biggest ones is anger. Leaving the white church because you're angry because you don't think they're doing what you think they're supposed to be doing is not a biblical reason to leave the white church. I'm going to say that. Now, for some people, that may be hard to hear. I understand that. Like, I understand frustrations and anger and like tired of feeling alone. I get that.
Yeah.
But biblically, that is not a reason to leave the church.
Yeah.
Because what that does is it creates bitterness and animosity, not only between that particular church, but between the church overall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think that kind of goes along with the interview I heard from Sho Baraka, who's a Christian hip hop artist. I forget what podcast it is. I'll find it. I'll link to it.
Yeah.
But he talks about how, he was disappointed with how his church handled certain tragedies.
Yeah.
Especially unarmed Black men being shot.
Yeah.
He was disappointed with how they were handling those and talking about those. And he made it known that he was disappointed with those things. And, if asked would he ever leave? He would say, where would he go?
Yeah.
Where would I go if I left this? Like, this is, like it or not, this is my family. Like, these are the people I have covenanted with, I'm with. Where else can I go? You know, there are only so many churches you can go to in our consumeristic culture to find the one that meets every single one of your needs.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of goes along with what you were saying.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's I think I know what interview you're talking about.
Yeah.
I think he did it. I think was it Jude 3?
This is Jude 3?
I think it was Jude 3.
Okay.
Because that's a great podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's real. Shout out. Yeah. Hit us up, girl. We'd love to be on your podcast. Yeah, I think that's a real thing. Like, you have to wrestle through that. Like, it's whenever we act out in anger, that is ungodly anger, it always leads to some kind of sin, and we have to be on guard on that.
Yeah.
And so, like, that's why I say never leave a church because you're angry because they haven't responded the way you felt like they should have responded.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they may not know, like with Cheryl Baraka, how you're feeling unless you tell them.
Yeah.
Or they may not know that the response wasn't fully biblical. They may have responded in a biblical way, but hasn't fully stepped into like the full realm of obedience in that.
Right.
And you expressing that may help them move forward in that in a little way.
Yeah.
I think another bad reason to leave is lack of ethnic community. And what I mean by that is there's this idea that as an African American, connecting with other African Americans because you have a shared experience and shared thought process in some form or fashion, not monolithic, but something shared with.
Yeah.
If you're not having it at the church you are and you really desire it, you're tempted to like want to leave the white church to do that, right? And I think that isn't fully biblical. I understand it completely, but I also think that there is a call for you to stick in there. I'm going to say that again because it sounded weird saying stick it.
Just nail it.
Yeah. I think there's a call for the African American and majority white church that if you are being tempted to leave because you're desiring more ethnic groups that look like you, I think there's a call for you to really stick in it with your friends at that church. Now, I'm not saying don't ever fellowship with other African Americans. Like here I have a fellowship group of just strictly African American leaders and men that want to become leaders that are African American that I hang out with regularly. And that's good and that's beautiful. But I will always call this church my church home, until the Lord says something different, or I die. One of the two. But just want to leave because you want more ethnic community in your realm. I don't think that's a biblical reason.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever see that in the Word of God.
Yeah.
And so I think that's another not good reason to leave. That's the wrong reason to leave the church.
Yeah. So I guess the next question is, why is being a minority in a white church a good thing? Obviously, like, you're a Christian and you're having Christian community in that aspect.
Yeah.
But we're specifically talking about minorities in majority churches. Yeah. So why? Because you're in this position as well. You're a minority in a majority church.
Yeah.
So what are some good reasons why should this be a thing that minorities should seek out or even want to be a part of?
Yeah, I think there are multiple reasons, and you got some ideas on this too, I'm assuming. But
maybe.
We'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think there are many good reasons, man. Like the way I grew up, man, it's like I always wrestled with the idea of being the minority in a majority culture, and it wasn't until like in college and beyond that I started to understand why. Is I think one of the good things about being a minority in a majority church is that you, first and foremost, allow the church to see areas that they may not realize that they wrestle in. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about like racism in general.
Yeah.
But there is something about you being in a majority church that when something happens on the news or some thought pops up, and they don't automatically assume everyone thinks the same way.
Sure.
And so they're going to come to you and ask like, hey, so what do you feel about this? What do you think about this?
Yeah.
And it may open their eyes to like a different approach to something or a different thought pattern on that.
Yeah.
And now we have to make sure our words are lined up with scriptures.
Yeah.
But it still creates that. I think in tying into that, though, it also means that we're building bridges. Yeah. That we're a bridge for both sides, black and white, or whatever minority, majority culture you're dealing with, to cross and meet in the middle, you know? Kind of like one of them like epic scenes on a movie where like both sides meet in the middle of a bridge or something like that. But instead of duking it out, you're joining together. You know what I mean? I think that's the thing, man. It's like I love the story. I went to to Gospel Coalition Conference several years ago. It was me and my dad. That's how we hang out together. We go to just conferences, you know. And we go to this conference, and there I'm listening to a talk by Thabiti. It was like a breakout session. Yeah. And Thabiti is on a panel with a couple of people talking about racial reconciliation. Yeah. And after that, I got a chance to meet Thabiti, right? I go up to the dude, and like I'm looking at him like he's like a rock star in my eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like what he just said just rocked my world. And this is when everything was happening with Ferguson and all these shootings and things were popping up. And I go up to him and I ask him questions like, "Hey, this is my situation. I'm pretty much the only black person in my church now. And I want to see us reconciled. I want people to come together, but like I don't know how to do that. You have any advice for me at all? I'm looking for just anything." Yeah. He goes, "You know, every sword has to have a point. You stay there. You be a bridge." Like that was some of the most encouraging stuff I have ever heard, right? Because I'm looking for the complex answer to how to like start this movement or something in a church and a culture. And he says the first thing you do is just stay there and be diligent. Yeah. Right. And so I think bringing that mindset back to my church and to the city of St. Louis has been so influential. Yeah. And so like just it's a good thing to be a bridge. Yeah. You know, there's nothing wrong with being a bridge. Like people don't like to be bridge because they equate it to tokenism. And there is tokenism, but there's also being a bridge. Like tokenism means you're blending in, you're trying to fit in, you don't want to deal with any kind of controversy, and then you're just used to like set this model like you should be like this black person. That's tokenism. Yeah. A bridge is someone that says, no, I'm not moving until both sides start to reconcile, and I'm going to help you guys come together. And so I think that's another good thing about being a minority in the church, man. Honestly. I think it shows the unity and diversity that we talked about in our last podcast episode. I think that's the big thing. Is like we want to see that happen, then we have to stay. Yeah. And we have to be that diversity. Even if we're the only one, we have to be that diversity. And then I think one that is really underrated and good thing is minorities are needed in the church. Like minorities are needed. Their stories, their views, their wisdom, their talents. Like, we are needed in the majority church. Yeah. And I think that's a thing that is hard for people to grasp and think about. Because like, okay, like what do you mean? Like this person has the same talent as you. Like, yeah, but minorities bring a different flavor sometimes. You know what I mean? Sure. Yeah. It's a different flavor, and it brings this multi-ethnic beauty about it, you know? And so there is a need for that. But also, like, in certain situations, you need to have African-Americans or Asians, or if you're a black church, you need some white people in your church to help you because they have talents and abilities that you may not have in your church without them. Yeah. You know, and I think that, in a sense, affirms a minority. Yeah. That affirms their identity in the church. That affirms their identity. Yeah. And I think, I think that's so big, man. Like, to hear that you're needed in a majority church and your talents are needed here is huge. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the call, not just to make that a priority for minority members of your church, made a call for people who feel isolated in your church. You know, the whole reason why minorities are needed in the church is because they are imago Dei. Yeah. And just like the passage we read in Hebrews chapter 10, right? They're needed to help stir us up to love and good works. We're not to neglect each other, as some are in the habit of doing, right? Yeah. That's the call for weekly meetings, weekly gatherings in the church. Yeah. We're there to encourage all the more as we see the day drawing near. Yeah. Y'all are needed in the church. We're needed in the church. Everyone who is an imago Dei is needed in the church, who is called by Christ, regenerated by the Spirit, needed in the church. Yeah. To encourage and spur one another on towards love and good works. Yeah.
It doesn't matter your ethnicity or skin or gender or age. You're needed in the church because you have specific perspectives. Perspectives. You have. I'm getting specific and perspectives mixed up. But you have specific perspectives. You have specific gifts.
Yeah.
You have specific callings that you bring to the church that many other people don't have. And I also want to say this. This is not the experience of all Black people.
That's right.
I want to say that up front. We're talking about it right now, but I want to make this clear. There are some people who are Black who don't experience this at all.
Yeah.
And I want to recognize and acknowledge that as well. That the reason we're talking about this is that this is something that's been brought to the forefront by almost a majority of people who are seeing this and experiencing this. But I also want to bring up that there are people who don't experience this, and they're completely and totally fine with this. So I just want to acknowledge them, and they're just as needed in the church as people who hold a different perspective on this issue as well. They're just as needed. So I just want to make that clear up front that there are some people who don't hold this perspective that we do on this, and they're Black. And they don't have this perspective. So finally, we're kind of talking about reasons why Black people are leaving churches and why there is this kind of quiet exodus happening. But we even kind of talked about biblical reasons why, but I want to hone in on this a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
What are biblical reasons? This is regardless of race, regardless of gender, regardless of age. What are some biblical reasons why a person should leave a church?
Yeah, that's good, man. Yeah, I think this is, like you said, it's a model for every Christian.
Yeah.
And I think right now, as we're looking at this idea of the quiet exodus, I think it's really applicable. Tim, I think is pronounced his last name, Chalice. Dang, I always say it wrong. Chalice.
He's Canadian.
Oh, okay. Hey, bro, hit us up, man. We'd love to have you on here. Tim Chalice wrote this beautiful article about the reasons that we should be leaving for a church. The only reasons. He listed, was it 5 different reasons or 4?
He had 4 different reasons.
Okay, 4 reasons.
4 different reasons you must, but he had a couple other reasons, some in-between reasons,
Yeah, so we will say that these are the reasons that biblically you have to leave the church.
Yep.
Like, no matter how you feel about it, if this is happening, you have to get out.
Yep.
And so he says that the church has abandoned the gospel. It comes from Galatians 1, 7 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
That's accepting heresy or politics before Christ.
Yeah,
and I think that's a huge.
Yeah.
He says that if the leaders tolerate error from those who teach, and so it's something like Romans 16, 17, I think, on that one.
Yeah.
About how the leader is like, I'm willing to accept any wind and doctrine, basically.
Yeah, and we're not just talking about error of they're a Republican or a Democrat, or they have a different opinion on the style of worship.
Yeah.
This is they're tolerating gossip. They're tolerating adultery. They're tolerating the practice of a gay lifestyle. They're tolerating those things. The things that which God clearly calls us in. They're not acknowledging it. They're not bringing it to the forefront of the congregation. They're just kind of going along their own way, and they're tolerating it. And so that's a reason why to leave a church.
Man, that's get out.
Get out.
What's another reason why he says that you must leave the church?
Yeah, I think we even kind of alluded to this with the passage from Hebrews, is that there's an utter disregard that Charles brings up. There's an utter disregard for biblical church discipline. I think that extends out to just church structure in general, right? Yeah. If you're neglecting to meet together regularly, if the Christ has called his church to practice church discipline, as painful as it is, from Matthew 18. They've disregarded church discipline, and he even brings up 1 Corinthians 5 and 2 Thessalonians. It's a mouthful to say. Second. I'm getting tongue-tied on my words here. Minority, majority, specific perspective. 2 Thessalonians 3, 6, and 14. Yeah. Talking about Christ has created his church to be ordered, has created his church to be structured, to model the relationship that he has with his Father, and to model the relationship that we have with him. Yeah. And if the church has abandoned that, then man, you better get out of there. Yeah. Get out of there fast, because they have no control over their members. They have no control over who comes in and who comes out and who teaches. Yeah. Man, that's a dangerous place to be.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
So what leading us out? What are some other ways that other things that you just leave the church?
Yeah, I think the other one he mentioned here was that the church is marked by utter hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and we have to be very careful about this because we throw the word hypocrite out real easily nowadays. Yep. It's like, oh, you're a hypocrite. You're a hypocrite. And when we say that, we usually are trying to apply it to our personal beliefs or views on certain issues.
Yeah.
But like he mentions 2 Timothy 3:5 here, which is really good, where it says that they are, let me read this here real quick, having the appearance of godliness but denying its power.
Okay.
Okay, so like I think that's very important.
Yeah.
Because we can appear to be godly, but we're not letting God lead us, and we're trying to run life our own. That is hypocrisy, you know? Yeah, and like the very next part, he says, avoid such people. Like he tells Timothy to dodge the hypocrites.
Yeah.
And so like, leaving the church that's hypocritical. Not hypocritical. That's hypocritical. Both of us with these words, bro.
We got a problem with words today. Words are hard.
Words are difficult. Church that's living hypocritical, that is one you can't be in. Right?
Yeah, man, I would even say be careful with the label of hypocrite.
Yeah.
Man, because that label gets thrown around so much. And I think what we're saying is that's a serious charge.
Yeah, yeah.
You're telling someone that they are living differently than what Christ has called them to live.
Yeah.
That's a serious charge.
Yeah.
That's a serious charge to consider when you're leaving a church.
Yeah.
So I would caution people, be careful with how you use the word hypocrites. I know it's gaining a lot of traction in our culture now. Yeah. It's a very hip thing to say to people. But the Bible calls us to be careful with our words.
Yeah.
And to be sound with our judgments.
Yeah.
So I would say be very careful with how you say the word hypocrite, but also know that it exists, and sometimes it is needed to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
To wake people up.
Yeah, that's good, man. I got a question for you, though.
Oh.
I'm going to ask you this because we're talking a lot about like how much like the let's be honest, like the white church hasn't done this, hasn't done that. It can feel like that, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen, like in your experience, either now or in the past, how a white church has come around African American people in their congregation to love them and serve them and share the gospel and walk with them through like these hard times? Have you seen that happen? And if so, what was beautiful about that?
Yeah, I think that I've specifically seen it in our church. I'll give a couple examples. During the Charlottesville riots that happened or protests that happened, our church was very specific about how we addressed that the Sunday.
Yeah.
We had our pastor call at the beginning for an account of our hearts. Yeah. Where are our hearts on this? Where are our lives on this? And he even specifically said, if you're African American and you're here, we love you. We're here for you. We mourn with you, and we want to be the people who welcome you into our church. I mean, that was so beautiful, so loving. Just absolutely blew me away. It was awesome. Another thing that I think that our church has done really well is during the Stockley verdict that happened a couple months ago. That was last year.
Yeah, man.
We held a family meeting.
Yeah.
Where we got a bunch of different people together who agreed and disagreed on different topics, and we just got to hear what everybody had to say on this issue. It didn't matter whether you were white or black, people were able to express their thoughts and express their emotions. We were able to walk away with this great understanding of, we're a complex and diverse body, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And that's awesome. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. And it's great that we're propping up and saying, we don't all agree on this issue, but man, that shouldn't stop us from loving each other. That shouldn't stop us from encouraging each other and loving each other and spurring each other on with love and good works. And so those are the specific instances that I've seen done really well, even in our own church, of ways that we have come alongside Black people in the trauma that they've experienced. And I know there are plenty and many and thousands of other examples that are out there, but those are the specific few that I could think of right now.
That's good, man.
What about you?
Yeah, man, I think I've seen a lot of love from my church in these past few years. Not only of like, hey, I'm praying for you, or hey, how you doing with everything? But like giving me space and room to feel the pain. There wasn't a lot of, like, if I was dealing with some anger or frustration, there wasn't a lot of like, you can't feel that, you can't deal with that, you can't, you know, there was a lot of like, hey, feel that, we want to walk with you through that, and then like you can come talk to us about anything. Like my pastor literally tells me all the time, like, hey, if you have any questions or you want to just vent, talk to me, you know. And so I think creating that place, and so I've felt nothing but love here in my church, you know. And I think that is where a lot of people that are minorities in majority white churches are looking for, as at least as a starting point. And so I think that is the beginning. But like going off of that though, what do you think are some things that a church, a majority church, or a church in general can do to encourage their minority members?
Yeah, man, I treat them like the Imago Dei. Treat them as an image bearer. Don't treat them like they're somebody different, or they're somebody that deserves either a special status or a lower status. Obviously, welcome them into your church and love them, not because they're black or because they're a different ethnicity, but because they're made in the image of God, and God has made them uniquely with their melanin count. He has made them uniquely with their culture that they're bringing into your church. Man, that's a beautiful, wonderful, amazing thing. Love them as an image bearer. That should be a primary focus for many churches, is to welcome in new members and to welcome in new people who are coming in. Like that's a beautiful, wonderful, and amazing thing. I'd also say, because of that, bring them into your community. Bring them into your gospel-centered community. Man, that's a wonderful, amazing, beautiful thing, because the gathering of a church is more than just a Sunday. It's every day. It's an everyday life thing that you can be involved with within a community. And it's a beautiful, wonderful thing to be able to come alongside someone and bring them alongside you in that community. So, man, what are some other practical ways that we can begin to love others well in this process?
Yeah, man, I think part of it is encouraging them to and equipping them to lead. I think that is going to be a big encouragement to leaders, to African Americans or minorities in your church in general. Because you can welcome them in and you can encourage them, but if they have gifts that they aren't exercising in the church, they're going to start to feel isolated. Like any Christian will feel that way. Like if you saying, hey, I have a passion for this, and it does fit your church's vision and calling, yet you're not putting them or training them up to be leaders in that, I think then they're going to start to pull away. And so you need to encourage them by equipping them to lead in those areas that they're passionate about and line up with your church's mission. Another place is like, another thing you can do is create a place for them to speak about their wrestles. I think we had talked about that with our church, man. Like, I think that does more help than most churches realize. Because a lot of times you can feel like, I don't have a place to speak about this with anyone. Like if you're the only, like you're literally the only black person in your church, and something like Ferguson happens or the Stockley verdict happens, you can feel like, I don't know if I can talk to this person because their response may not be the same. They may not like what I think or how I feel. And so I'm just going to hold on to it inside and then vent on social media, or hold it inside and let bitterness build up in me and anger and frustration until I start to doubt even my faith. That's an extreme example, but it's happened. You know? And so if we as a church are trying to encourage the minorities, we need to create a space for like, hey, like, talk to me. What are you feeling? Like, be real with me. I'm not gonna come back at you. I'm not gonna try to debate you. I want to hear how you're feeling about this right now. So yeah, I think that's another thing we can do. You got any other ones? Do you have any other forms of encouragement?
Affirm them in their ethnic identity. Don't try to ignore it. Don't try to downplay it. Don't try to say that it doesn't matter. It does matter, because God made you that way. God has made you with your melanin count. He has made you with your culture. He has made you as your ethnicity, and we should rejoice in that. We should love and embrace that, and seek to disciple each other in that process. And even further than that, join with them in their world. Like you said last episode, in order for us to live in a multi-ethnic church, we must live multi-ethnic lives. We have to live multicultural lives, and that means experiencing things that maybe you wouldn't have experienced before, going with them to where they go, going with them to where they hang out, and being able to disciple them, and them being able to disciple you in those processes. That is going to be so incredibly important when you're trying to build a multi-ethnic community. So, guys, this has been a great conversation.
Yes, it is.
And I love it. Guys, you can check us out at coffeeandcreampodcast.com. I want to give a special shout out to our sponsors, especially for the month of July, Crossway Publishing. You can check them out at crossway.org. Also, shout out to Switch Coffee at switchcoffee.co. Use our promo code Coffee and Cream for 10% off of your order. Also, JM Films. You can check him out at jmfilms.com for all of your film and video needs.
The Beast.
The Beast. So, guys, this episode was produced by Nick Francis and was mixed by David Butler. That'll be it for us. You can check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we'll be having blog posts every Wednesday. So check that out as well. But for right now, we will see you guys in 2 weeks.